The transport vessel's alarms screamed their final warning as Marcus Reeves fought the dying controls. Ice crystals had already begun forming on the inside of the cockpit windows, and his breath came out in visible puffs despite the environmental suit doing its best to keep him alive. Systems failure in 3.2. The automated voice didn't bother, finishing the countdown before everything went. Dark. Marcus had exactly enough time to curse his luck before the vessel slammed into the frozen surface of Valor 7, throwing him against his restraints with enough force to blur his vision. When the world finally stopped spinning, he found himself hanging at an awkward angle, looking down at cracked ice that glittered like broken diamonds in the pale light of the planet's distant sun. "Well," he muttered, releasing the harness and dropping carefully to avoid the jagged metal protruding from what used to be his instrument panel. That's one way to get hands-on research data. Marcus Reeves wasn't supposed to be here. As a xenobiologist for the Terran Science Collective, his job typically involved studying samples in climate-controlled labs, not crash-landing on uncharted ice worlds. But when the survey team had detected unusual thermal signatures, suggesting active biology on a planet that should have been frozen solid, his curiosity had overridden his common sense. Now, that curiosity might get him killed. His suit's display flickered to life, showing environmental readings that made him wince. -65 and dropping as the sun set. The emergency beacon was transmitting, but the nearest human outpost was 3 weeks away. He'd be a frozen corpse long before rescue arrived. Marcus grabbed what supplies he could salvage and stepped out into the alien winter. The cold hit him like a physical blow, even through his insulated suit. His breath crystallized instantly, and each inhalation felt like swallowing frozen knives. The landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, a wasteland of ice and snow, broken only by strange crystalline formations that jutted from the ground like frozen lightning. His suit's scanner picked up those same thermal signatures that had drawn him here, emanating from a structure about 2 kilometers north. He'd barely taken 10 steps when he saw her. She emerged from behind one of the crystal formations like something from a fever dream. 9 feet tall, with skin the color of burnished copper and hair like spun silver that flowed down her back despite the howling wind. Her armor was minimal, revealing powerful muscles and curves that suggested both lethal strength and undeniable femininity. She carried a weapon that looked like a crystalline blade fused with some kind of energy projector, and she was pointing it directly at his chest. Marcus slowly raised his hands, his translator module already working to process her language. "I come in peace. You come uninvited." Her voice was like distant thunder, deep and resonant. Those eyes, they were the color of molten gold, and they pinned him in place more effectively than any weapon. "Human, you trespass on sacred Xanthari ground." "Xanthari?" Marcus's scientific mind kicked into gear despite the danger. "I've read about your species. The data said you avoided cold environments. Something about thermal regulation issues." She moved closer, and he realized she wasn't wearing much more than what could generously be called ceremonial armor. Yet she showed no signs of discomfort despite the lethal cold. "The data, as you call it, is centuries old. We adapt. We evolve." A smile crossed her face, predatory and amused. "We survive. Can you say the same, little human?" "Marcus. My name is Marcus Reeves." He kept his voice steady, meeting those golden eyes. "And I'm a xenobiologist, not a soldier. I crashed. I didn't mean to intrude on your territory. I am Queen Thesara of the Xanthari sovereignty." She circled him slowly, studying him like a fascinating specimen. "What you meant is irrelevant. What matters is that you are here, in my domain, during the sacred isolation period." "Sacred isolation?" "When our queens commune with the ancient ice." She stopped in front of him again. You have interrupted that communion. The penalty is death. That seems excessive for a survey accident. Something flickered in her expression: surprise, maybe even amusement. You face execution and make jokes? I face a lot of things with jokes. It's a human coping mechanism. Marcus glanced at the darkening sky as the wind picked up, bringing with it a sound like distant screaming. Though I'm guessing we'll both be facing something worse if we stay out here much longer. What is that sound? Desara's expression changed, the predatory amusement replaced by concern. The shrieking dark, a storm that comes when both moons align. She looked at him, then at the rapidly deteriorating weather. It kills everything caught outside, even Xanthari, so we have a mutual survival interest. It would appear so. She seemed to be weighing options, her jaw set in frustration. Finally, she grabbed his arm, her grip strong enough to dent the metal of his suit. Come, there is a temple nearby. Ancient, but the walls still stand. They ran through the intensifying storm, Marcus struggling to keep pace with her longer strides. The wind had become a physical force, hurling ice crystals that pinged off his suit like bullets. He could barely see 3 feet ahead, but Desara moved with absolute certainty, pulling him along. The temple materialized from the white chaos like a hallucination. Massive doors of carved ice stood partially open, and Desara dragged him through just as the storm reached its full fury. Inside, the howling wind became muffled, and the temperature, while still freezing, felt almost warm by comparison. Marcus collapsed against a wall, his suit's power reserves critically low. The heating elements were failing. He'd survived the crash only to potentially freeze in an ancient alien temple. Desara stood over him, her expression unreadable. Your suit is damaged, very observant. You will die if you remain in it. The power cells are nearly depleted, also very observant. Marcus tried to smile, but his teeth were chattering. Any suggestions from the queen who was about to execute me? She crouched down, bringing those golden eyes level with his. For a long moment, she just stared at him, and he found himself unable to look away. There was something in that gaze: curiosity, calculation, and something else he couldn't quite identify. Xanthari body temperature runs significantly higher than human, she said finally. We can share heat. It is the only way you survive until the storm passes. Are you offering to cuddle with me to prevent hypothermia? I am offering to prevent waste. But there was color in her copper cheeks now, a deeper bronze. You are an interesting specimen. It would be unfortunate if you froze before I could study you properly. Well, when you put it so romantically. Marcus began removing his suit with shaking hands. For the record, this isn't how I imagined first contact with an alien species going. No? Desara helped him with the suit's fastenings, her movement surprisingly gentle. How did you imagine it? More talking, less potential death by freezing. He was down to his thermal underlayer now, and the cold was immediate and brutal. Maybe some formal introductions. A nice dinner. The usual. Humans, she said, but there was amusement in her voice now. She pulled him against her, and the heat radiating from her body was like stepping into sunlight. Always so obsessed with protocol. Marcus found himself pressed against 9 feet of alien warrior queen, her arms wrapped around him with surprising tenderness. The intimacy of it should have been awkward, but instead it felt strangely natural. Her skin was incredibly warm, almost hot to the touch, and he could feel her dual heartbeats beneath her sternum. This is highly irregular, Desara muttered, though she didn't pull away. Queens do not. We do not share warmth with outsiders. Making an exception for the interesting specimen? Something like that. Her voice was quieter now, and he felt her breath against his hair. You are different from what I expected. The data on humans suggested you would be more fearful, more submissive in the presence of superior species. The data on both our species seems to be pretty outdated. Marcus looked up at her, finding those golden eyes already watching him. Maybe we should create some new data. The storm raged outside, and in the darkness of the ancient temple, surrounded by cold and danger, something sparked between human and Zenthari. Something that would change both their worlds forever, but neither of them knew that yet. The storm's fury had transformed the ancient temple into a prison of ice and howling wind. Marcus remained pressed against the Sara's warmth, acutely aware of every point where their bodies touched. His scientific mind tried to catalog the physiological differences, her dual heartbeats, the unusual heat signature, the way her muscles felt like coiled steel beneath surprisingly soft skin. "You're staring," the Sara observed, her voice rumbling through her chest. "Occupational hazard. I study alien biology for a living." Marcus shifted slightly, trying to find a more comfortable position, though usually from a much more professional distance. "And what does your professional observation tell you?" "That your species is fascinating. Your thermal regulation is completely different from the outdated reports. You're generating enough heat to keep both of us alive, yet showing no signs of metabolic stress." He paused. "Also, you're absolutely stunning, but I'm guessing that's not in the scientific journals." The Sara made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Humans, you face death and still find time for flattery." "It's not flattery if it's true." Marcus met her gaze, surprised by his own boldness. Something about their situation, the isolation, the danger, the intimacy forced by survival, had stripped away normal social barriers. "Your species values honesty, right? According to the anthropological data, we value strength, honor, and directness." Her golden eyes studied him with an intensity that made his breath catch. "You possess an unusual combination of all three, despite your physical fragility." "Fragile? I'll have you know I survived a crash landing. Barely." But her arms tightened around him, slightly protective. "Your species is so delicate, so brief. Scifi live for centuries. You burn bright and fade fast. Maybe that's why we burn so bright." Marcus could feel the heat between them changing, becoming something more than mere survival. "We don't have centuries to waste on caution." The Sara's breath caught, almost imperceptible. "You are either very brave or very foolish. I've been hearing that a lot lately." He reached up, his hand hovering near her face. "May I?" The fact that he asked seemed to surprise her. Slowly, she nodded. Marcus traced the line of her jaw, fascinated by the contrast between her warrior's strength and the softness of her skin. Her eyes closed briefly, and he felt her dual heartbeats accelerate. "This is madness," Sara whispered. "Our species are incompatible. Scifi and humans. It's impossible." Lots of things were impossible until someone tried them. Marcus's thumb brushed her lower lip. "Besides, we're already breaking protocol. Might as well be thorough about it. Thorough." She opened her eyes, and they were blazing now, literally glowing with some inner light. "You don't understand what you're suggesting. Scifi bonding is ... intense. We are not gentle creatures. I'm tougher than I look. Are you?" In one fluid motion, she shifted their positions, laying him back against the fur she'd spread on the stone floor. She loomed over him, powerful and magnificent. "Last chance to reconsider, Marcus Reeves. I'm a scientist. I never back away from new discoveries." What happened next was like nothing Marcus had ever experienced. The Sara was right, Scifi were not gentle. But there was care beneath the passion, a surprising tenderness in how she handled him, despite her overwhelming strength. Her skin blazed against his, and he learned that those golden eyes glowed brightest in moments of deep emotion. Time became meaningless. The storm outside raged on, but inside the temple, they created their own heat. Marcus discovered that Xanthari had erogenous zones along their shoulders and neck, that their skin flushed deeper bronze with arousal, that they made sounds like distant thunder when pleased. The Sara, in turn, seemed fascinated by human responses, by the way his skin flushed, by the sounds she could draw from him. She was demanding but attentive, powerful but surprisingly intuitive. When they finally lay tangled together, both breathing hard, Marcus felt like he'd been through a beautiful storm. That was ... double quotes, he started. Unprecedented, the Sara finished. She propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. In 3 centuries of life, I have never. No one has ever ... I have that effect on people? Marcus grinned, then grew more serious. Are you okay? I mean, really okay with what just happened? You asked my permission after the fact? I asked during too. Multiple times, as I recall. But I mean emotionally, politically. Your people have strict protocols about queens and outsiders, don't they? The Sara was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing absent patterns on his chest. My people are dying, Marcus. Slowly but certainly. Our fertility rates have been declining for generations. We are a species facing extinction, though few admit it openly. I didn't know that. We hide our weakness well. Her voice carried centuries of pain. Queens especially. We are expected to be strong, to bear offspring to continue our lines. But I have lived 300 years and never conceived. The medical priests say my body is too ... perfect, too strong. It rejects any genetic material that doesn't meet impossible standards. Marcus took her hand, squeezing gently. That's a hell of a burden to carry alone. Queens are always alone. She looked at him, vulnerable in a way he suspected few ever saw. Even surrounded by subjects, advisors, warriors. We stand apart. We must. Sounds lonely. It is. She kissed him then, slow and deep. Thank you for this moment, Marcus Reeves. For treating me not as a queen, but as simply the Sara. You're welcome. Simply the Sara. He pulled her closer, ignoring the logical part of his brain, screaming about impossibility and protocol violations. Though, for the record, you're extraordinary both as a queen and as yourself. They stayed entwined as the storm gradually weakened. Marcus felt himself drifting into sleep, warm and safe, despite the alien world around them. His last conscious thought was how perfectly she fit against him. Despite all the reasons she shouldn't, he didn't notice the faint shimmer of light that passed between them, or the way the Sara's body glowed briefly with an inner radiance before fading back to normal. Dawn came cold and clear. Marcus woke to find the Sara already dressed in her minimal armor, staring out at the pristine landscape beyond the temple doors. Something in her posture spoke of tension. We need to talk, she said without turning around. Marcus pulled on his repaired suit. The Sara had apparently worked on it while he slept and joined her. That's never a good way to start a conversation. My people will be searching for me. The sacred isolation was supposed to last 3 more days, but after that storm, they'll send scouts. She finally looked at him, and there was pain in those golden eyes. They cannot find you here, cannot know what happened between us. Why? Because I'm human? Because you're an outsider? Because our union is forbidden by ancient law? Because ... She hesitated. Because if my rivals discovered, I'd compromise the royal line with alien contact. They would use it to destroy me. Politics among Xanthari can be lethal. Marcus felt his stomach drop. So this was what? A one-time thing? Stress relief during a storm? Don't. Her voice cracked slightly. Don't diminish what we shared. It meant. It means more than you know. She took his hands in hers, dwarfing them. But I am a queen. My responsibilities extend beyond my personal desires. I must protect my people, even from knowledge of my own choices. So we just pretend this never happened? We acknowledge reality. She pulled something from her armor, a small crystalline device. This is a secure communicator, one of only 3 in existence. If you activate it, I will know. I will find a way to respond. She pressed it into his palm. But Marcus, you cannot use it unless absolutely necessary. The risk to both our peoples, ... I understand. He closed his fist around the device, feeling its warmth. For what it's worth, Thisara, last night wasn't just about survival for me, nor for me. She kissed him one last time, fierce and desperate. Now go. Head south. There's a human research station. 2 days' journey. Tell them you crashed, survived the storm in an ice cave. Nothing more. And you? I returned to being a queen. She straightened to her full height, the vulnerable woman from last night vanishing behind royal bearing. But I will remember this. Remember you. Marcus wanted to argue, to fight, to find some solution. But he was a xenobiologist, not a diplomat or warrior. He had no right to complicate her political situation further. He left the temple and headed south, following his suit's navigation. He didn't look back, knowing if he did, he might not be able to leave. The communicator burned warm against his chest, a secret shared between worlds. 6 weeks later, Marcus stood in his lab aboard the research station, staring at his latest analysis results without really seeing them. His colleagues had accepted his crash landing story, praised his survival skills, and given him a clean bill of health. Everything had returned to normal. Except nothing was normal. He touched the communicator through his shirt, as he'd done hundreds of times since leaving Valor 7. He hadn't activated it. Hadn't dared. Thisara had made the consequences clear. But he dreamed of her every night. Her golden eyes. Her fierce passion. The vulnerability she'd shown him in the darkness. His scientific training told him it was just neurochemical bonding, oxytocin and dopamine doing their evolutionary work. His heart knew better. Reeves, you've been staring at that screen for 20 minutes. His colleague, Jamie Foster, leaned in the doorway. The protein sequences not cooperating? Something like that. Marcus forced himself to focus. Just trying to understand an unusual thermal regulation pattern one encountered. From the ice planet? I thought you said you didn't get any biological samples before the crash. Passive observations only. The lie came easily now. Too easily. But interesting nonetheless. Jamie left, and Marcus was alone again with his thoughts and his secrets. He'd tried to bury himself in work, but everything reminded him of Thisara. Every xenobiological paper about species incompatibility. Every report on interspecies genetic barriers. He was driving himself crazy. The communicator activated. Marcus nearly jumped out of his skin as it pulsed against his chest, hot and urgent. He grabbed it with shaking hands, staring at the glowing crystal. She'd said to only use it in emergencies. If she was activating it, he pressed the response trigger. Thisara's voice came through, but it was wrong. Strained, frightened. Marcus. I need you to come back. Something's happened. Something impossible. His heart hammered. Are you hurt? Is someone threatening you? I'm pregnant. The world tilted. That's, you said. I know what I said. Her voice cracked. Synthari genetics don't work this way. We can't conceive with outsiders. The medical priests have confirmed the impossible biological barriers, incompatible DNA structures, and yet a sound that might have been a sob. The embryo is healthy, growing fast, showing markers of both our species. Marcus's mind raced to the implications. Interspecies breeding that shouldn't be possible. A hybrid child that violated everything known about genetic compatibility. How fast is fast? Xanthari gestation is typically 6 months. But this, Marcus, I'm already showing changes. The priestess who examined me says the embryo is developing at an accelerated rate. Perhaps 3 months total, maybe less. And the political situation? Contained, for now. Only my most trusted advisor knows, High Priestess Navira. She's sworn to secrecy, but Desara's voice dropped to barely a whisper. She's conflicted. Her duty is to me, but also to Xanthari law and tradition. I don't know how long her loyalty will hold against her conscience. Marcus was already moving, pulling up star charts. I'm coming. I'll find a way. No. Marcus, if you come here, my rivals will know. Prince Keldern already suspects something. He's been pushing for a royal inquiry into my isolation period. If he discovers this, then what do you want me to do? Just leave you alone to deal with this. Silence stretched between them, filled only with static. When Desara spoke again, her voice was small, vulnerable in a way that broke his heart. I don't know. I'm 300 years old, and I don't know what to do. I'm terrified, Marcus, of what this means, of what happens to the child if my people discover its origins, of what happens to you. I'm not afraid. You should be. But there was relief in her voice, barely concealed. If you come, it must be secret. And you must be prepared to leave quickly if necessary. I understand. Marcus was already planning routes, fabricating cover stories. Desara, whatever happens, we face it together. That child is half mine. That makes this my responsibility too. Human foolishness. Xanthari stubbornness. A sound that might have been a laugh, shaky but real. There's a trade delegation arriving at the orbital station in 4 days. Humans wanting to establish commerce agreements. You could join them, claim to be a commercial xenobiologist assessing trade potential. I'll be there. Marcus hesitated. Desara, I've thought about you every day since I left. As have I. Her voice softened. The nights are longer without your warmth, Marcus Reeves. The connection ended, leaving Marcus alone with racing thoughts and a rapidly forming plan. He'd need to request emergency leave, fabricate credentials, prepare for every contingency. 4 days. He had 4 days to figure out how to protect the woman he loved and the impossible child they'd created. 4 days later, Marcus stood in the docking bay of the Xanthari orbital station, trying not to look as nervous as he felt. The trade delegation had accepted his presence easily enough. A xenobiologist added credibility to their mission. If only they knew. Representatives of Earth, a Xanthari official announced, you will be escorted to the surface for the opening ceremonies. Queen Desara herself will receive you. Marcus's heart hammered as they were led to a transport vessel. Through the viewports, Valor 7 spread below, still frozen, still beautiful, still holding memories he couldn't shake. The palace was carved from ice itself, towers and spires that caught the light and threw it back in rainbow fragments. Marcus barely registered the splendor as they were ushered through corridors lined with Xanthari warriors, each one towering and formidable. Then he saw her. Desara sat on a throne of crystalline ice, wearing formal armor that covered more than her usual attire, but still revealed her powerful form. She looked every inch a queen regal, untouchable, magnificent until their eyes met. For just a moment her royal mask slipped. He saw relief, joy, fear, and something that looked like love. Then the mask returned, and she was addressing the delegation with formal courtesy. Marcus barely heard the speeches, the formal greetings, the diplomatic pleasantries. He was watching Desara, noting the subtle changes. The slightly fuller curve to her figure that her armor mostly concealed. The way she occasionally touched her midsection, protective. The tension in her shoulders that spoke of secrets carried. And this is? Desara's voice cut through his thoughts, and he realized she was looking directly at him. "Marcus Reeves, Your Majesty, xenobiologist." He bowed, playing his part. "Here to assess biological trade potential." Interesting. Her golden eyes held his. "Perhaps you would consent to a private consultation? I have questions about human scientific methods." The delegation's leader nodded eagerly. "Of course, Your Majesty. Dr. Reeves would be honored." 10 minutes later, Marcus found himself in a private chamber, door sealed, finally alone with Thesara. She crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled him into a crushing embrace. "You came," she whispered against his hair. "Did you doubt it?" He held her as tightly as he dared, feeling her warmth, her strength, her trembling. "I doubted everything except you." She pulled back, cupping his face in her hands. "Marcus, there are things you need to know. Complications." Before she could continue, a door opened that Marcus hadn't noticed. A Zenthari woman entered, older than the Sara, but still striking, wearing robes that marked her as a high-ranking priestess. "High Priestess Navira," Isara said formally. "This is Marcus Reeves, the father." Navira studied Marcus with an intensity that made him feel like a specimen under a microscope. The human who broke 3 centuries of conception failure. Her voice was neutral, revealing nothing. "You've caused quite the theological crisis, young man." "That wasn't exactly my intention." Few cataclysmic events are intentional. She moved closer, her eyes scanning him with what he recognized as professional medical interest. "The embryo carries markers from both species, but the integration is unlike anything in our medical records. It's as if your genetics didn't just combine, they synergized, created something entirely new. Is the child healthy?" Marcus asked, his hand finding the Sara's. "Remarkably so, but developing fast. Too fast. At current rates, the queen will give birth within 6 weeks." Navira's expression softened slightly. "Which brings us to our primary problem. Prince Keldrin has demanded a royal examination. He suspects something, though he doesn't know what. If his physicians examine the queen, they'll discover the hybrid pregnancy immediately. Can you refuse? Not without giving him political ammunition." The Sara's grip tightened on Marcus's hand. "Zenthari law allows any royal family member to call for health examinations if they suspect the queen is compromised. So we need time." Marcus's mind shifted into problem-solving mode. A diplomatic excuse to delay the examination. Maybe claim you need to complete negotiations with the human delegation first. That buys perhaps 2 weeks. Navira crossed her arms. Not enough for full gestation. And once Keldrin realizes the delay tactic, he'll push harder. Then we need a better plan. Marcus looked between the 2 Zenthari women. What if we don't hide the pregnancy? What if we control the narrative instead? The Sara stared at him. "You want me to announce that I'm carrying a hybrid child? That would be political suicide." "Maybe. Or maybe it's the only move that lets you stay ahead of your enemies." Marcus squeezed her hand. "Keldrin is trying to expose you as compromised. But what if you present the pregnancy as a triumph? The first successful conception in your centuries of life. Proof that Zenthari can evolve, adapt, find new genetic partners to ensure species survival. That's..." Navira started, then paused, thinking. "Actually brilliant. Zenthari values strength, adaptation, and genetic vigor above almost everything else. A healthy hybrid child proves all 3. It also makes me a target," Marcus pointed out. "Once it's public that I'm the father, every Zenthari who opposes this will want me dead. Which is why we need to plan carefully." The Sara's eyes were blazing now. That warrior queen intelligence fully engaged. "Navira, can you prepare a medical briefing? Full genetic analysis, health projections, everything that makes this pregnancy look like an evolutionary breakthrough rather than a scandal?" "I can. But Marcus is right. He'll need protection. Constant, dedicated protection. He'll have it. The Sara's voice carried absolute certainty. Mine, looking at her, this fierce, magnificent queen who's carrying his child, despite impossible odds. Marcus felt something slot into place in his chest. This was insane. Politically suicidal. Completely unprecedented. And absolutely right. All right, he said. Let's give them a future they never saw coming. Navira smiled, sharp and satisfied. I'll begin preparations. Your Majesty, Mr. Reeves, I suggest you use the next few hours wisely. Once we move forward with this plan, privacy will become a rare luxury. She left them alone again, and the Sara pulled Marcus close, her forehead resting against his. Are you certain about this? She whispered. Once we announce the pregnancy, there's no going back. Your life will never be the same. You'll be bound to Xanthari politics, to me, to a child who will be unique in the galaxy. Marcus thought about his quiet life as a xenobiologist. The safe, predictable research. The comfortable isolation of academia. Then he thought about the Sara's golden eyes. The impossible child growing inside her. A future neither of their species had imagined. I've never been more certain of anything, he said, and kissed her. Outside, a storm was gathering, political, social, genetic. But inside, in this moment, they had each other. And sometimes that's where revolutions begin.